It's been 3 weeks since we've done one of these, which was attached to the end of the Batman 2 confirmed video. But yeah, 3 weeks. I do apologize to anyone who enjoys this series. If you're brand new here, what we do with these videos, and before I forget, welcome back family to another The Batman discussion series video. Essentially what we do is we talk, nerd out, theorize, discuss, speculate, freaking based off recent stuff in the movie, even stuff coming out of even this, or even pertaining to some news with regards to other series or spin-offs, if you will, like the Arkham series and the Penguin. So either way, a lot of you know what this is about, but for those who are new, just chill out, relax. If you're a Batman fan, you should enjoy the discussion here. You guys get heavily involved down in the comments, and today is no different. Got a backlog of a bunch of questions I still haven't got to, and let's just start off with number 1. So this is from Zabir Ular. Hopefully I didn't butcher the name there. So hey Boba, firstly, I am a huge fan of yours and really love and appreciate your videos. So my question is that since the Batman sequel has been greenlit and announced, what do you think will be the possible villain elements? And what are your thoughts on Barry Keoghan's Joker maybe being or somewhat involved and shown in the sequel? And in your opinion, how would you possibly like to see that? Okay, so that's quite a loaded one. So first of all, thank you very much for supporting my videos. I really am glad that you guys love this as much as I love talking about it, keeping that hype train slowly going as it stops off at the fuel stations along the way to the next big update we get for the Batman universe. That's the whole point of these. Plus, we love it. We love talking about it. We can also measure, what we were talking about here now and in previous videos when we do get closer and closer to things. So that's always fun as well. So what do I think the possible villain elements are? Well, this is something I somewhat have repeated in terms of I'm fairly confident that Matt Reeves, and this is at least the way I'm interpreting your question, will always maintain the status quo of multiple villains. So first movie, I've said this a billion times before, so sorry if it's starting to sound boring now, but Penguin, we had Penguin, but the big rogues gallery villain was that of the Riddler, Paul Dano's Edward Nashton, but then you had like Carmine Falcone, you had other characters like the anti-hero who's not quite Catwoman yet, but Selina Kyle, and dribs and drabs here and there. So I don't think that's going to be any different in his future installments. So second movie, we are probably going to have a big poised up rogues gallery villain. Of course we are. But then you're going to have an all more powerful kingpin type figure Penguin. But then you may have other characters introduced to be likened to that of someone like Carmine, but not exactly his role. This could be somebody, even like a good character, if you will. Someone like Harvey Dent before he becomes Two Face. But then you could also annotate this with some other villains, just like in the first movie, or other characters who are a bit shady. You could say someone, and please don't take this as happening, this is just off the top of my head, like Dr. Jonathan Crane. Maybe something happens in the Arkham series spin-off that, springboards someone like Hugo Strange, Harleen Quinzel, I don't know, Dr. Jonathan Crane, it could be anyone. Victor Zsasz could be locked up in Arkham even before Joker was, and even though Barry Keoghan's Joker isn't even Joker. So you see where I'm going with this. That's how I think the possible villain elements will work. So if you disagree with any of who I just said off the cuff at the top of my head, insert your own characters there. What are my thoughts on Barry Keoghan's Joker maybe being somewhat involved and shown in the sequel? I think that's very possible. I don't think Matt Reeves wants to... I feel like if he's going to involve him in a bigger way, that will be very deliberate, and I think there might be another question for this later on, so I might wait for that one. But if we're just going to assume that it's going to be cooked up slowly, so let's just say he might not appear till the third movie, the second movie could just be, and yet again, this hinges on so much of what the Arkham series has to offer, because if we have anything to go by with that, it does seem to be set after the Batman. If you want to know my thoughts on that and how exactly I might know that, well, I collected some evidence and I spoke about all of it and what could happen and the way I think, well, at least I would like, or I feel like would be a very successful Arkham series, at least in my vision, to go. I did a video on that. check it out. You're probably seeing the thumbnail on screen. I'll leave it in the cards above. Not everyone has seen it on the channel. I can tell kind of by the views, so I do just recommend checking it out if you want a nice bonus video. But the reason why I mentioned the Arkham series is, are we going to see another Arkham scene? Is the Arkham series going to facilitate a breakout? Even if it did, does that even mean that Keoghan's Joker would be a big character in the second movie? Or would he be licking his wounds, that kind of thing? I think it's very possible. Very, very possible. It just depends how much in the second movie, if at all, like to little. And if it is little, it could just be, that's because we're going to get the large shot and dose in maybe the third movie. Alright, so Cameron asks, hey Boba, great videos. So, do you think, since this movie has a Halloween theme with it, or kind of like a creepy theme, do you think they could go for a Christmas one with Mr. Freeze and have some themes of it in the movie? 110,000%. Yeah, like, yeah, this movie definitely, I wouldn't say it had like a filter of, like, as far as saying a filter of Halloween, but it was, you know, Thursday, October 31st. You know, the city streets are crowded for the holiday, and we saw Bruce, you know, it was Halloween in Gotham. We had Savage saying, oh, you know, I bet this is your favorite night of year, you freak, or whatever he said, because it was Halloween when he went to the crime scene. But yeah, like, it was creepy and recurring over it, for sure. So, I'm not saying, and again, some people are like, oh, why is everyone always talking about Mr. Freeze? That's not to say that we're saying he's the next villain. It's just such an easy example to use for so many different reasons. And to give you an example right now is Cameron's question, the themes. So if, let's assume, hypothetically, Mr. Freeze was the second movie's villain, that would be a really good Christmas theme. 100%. 110,000%. Not only are all of us very much so in love with the cinematography of this film, the design, the production design, of which, by the way, just to plug another video, I went over the production designer, James Chinland's art, which gave us tons of new looks of Gotham, how it once was perceived or conceptualized, if you will, to that of what was in the movie, how close some things were. You know, Joker in Arkham, we literally see his smile. Check that video out as well. I only want to plug it because I know a lot of you who may have not seen it would enjoy it. It's a long video. That's because we look at every freaking image on his portfolio website, which I also leave linked down in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. But the reason is, and why I'm saying this, is because I can imagine this Gotham City in James Chinland's mock-ups of his production design portfolio, Christmas, you know, snowy, you know, that kind of New York snow. I know all of you know what this looks like anyway. We've all seen Gotham in some way, shape, or form, in some iteration with snow in it. And, you know, it is kind of convenient that, oh, like, this might happen to be the movie where Mr. Freeze is in it. And it happens to be in the season of Gotham when there's snow. But, you know, I like that. It would be brilliant, you know, a snow-esque ice villain mixed with the season of snow in a sense. But that would mean, if you want to take into account time jumps, that considering this was October, that maybe, you know, we might be in Batman year 3, so the time jump would have to get all the way to the point of where there would be snow, because I don't think they're just going to wait till Christmas if you want to go with another holiday event-esque theme, because this was Halloween in the first movie. Second, you could say Christmas, but that would only be either a couple of months away from the first movie, and I don't think Reeves would leave that short amount of time, yet waiting till the following year's Christmas, so technically a year and 2 months, that could work. But this then brings up the whole debate of, how much time do I really think Reeves is going to leave in between movies? Because that's a lot of time for this Batman and his stories to not be told on screen. And the reason why I'm so fascinated about that is because I often go to and fro between, what if he doesn't leave much time at all? Because I really do feel like there's going to be such a linear progression for this Bruce Wayne and Batman, psychologically and roadmap-wise in every way you could perceive it. And I feel like with the Penguin spin-off, the Arkham series, the Penguin bridging, the gap between the first and the second movie, what if it is only a handful of months? But either way, the reason why I'm tangenting into all of this is because if it was Christmas, which I do think would be an amazing opportunity to explore a different, you know, visual Gotham, would it be a couple of months? I do think that is a bit too short a time. But then again, there's kind of cool advantages because we'd still get to see this early-esque kind of Batman still very much so progressively learning. Whereas on another side, a bunch of audience members would be like, yeah, but I kind of want to see a year, the following Christmas from the time of the first movie setting, and where he's got even more experience under his belt. Not too much time in the future, not too dramatically changed, but a year later to the following Christmas holiday, and that's where Mr. Freeze busts out. To be honest, to look at it on the bottom line, that would make more sense if you take into account that, you know, Gotham needs a bit of time to get rid of the flooding, to rebuild, repair, the mob war, Penguin facilitating the vacuum of power with his rise. You know, the following Christmas does kind of make sense, and that would be a good place to start the plot, with maybe a little bit of Bruce's monologue at the beginning, of course, annotating the past year of events of what he's done in Gotham, plus with us also having seen it, at least some of it, in that of the Penguin series. I think that would be a good starting point. A year. You know, a year, 1 month, or whatever, give or take, leading into the second movie. That again, this is all predicated off of the theory if Mr. Freeze was that villain, and how that would be perfectly suited to a Christmas holiday to match the visuals of the second movie. But again, might not even be that, and they could do Halloween again with Scarecrow, or you could argue that Penguin upgrading his iceberg lounge could also fit in with a bit of a snowy theme, or, you know, scrap all of that, you could still do snow with any villain. It just seems very appropriate if you want to adapt a Heart of Ice storyline. Now, this question from Chris P. Bacon is interesting because I would love to answer it, and I feel like due to my passion and trying to emulate myself into Matt Reeves's, you know, the situation he's in when writing the second movie, is so hard for me to answer because I feel like it must be so hard for him to choose out of the absolute vast variety he's got. So let me read the question first. So Chris says, "Hey Boba, I really love your channel. Thank you very much, and especially your coverage of the Batman. I've been watching you ever since Pattinson was announced for the role. That's crazy. Thank you for the continued support and can't get enough of your videos. I know you've already covered your thoughts on how Mr. Freeze could be adapted into this world, but I'm curious, how do you think he would fit in with the other characters? Also curious to know how likely you think he might actually appear in a sequel. If not him, who would you say right now has the highest chance of making a first appearance in the Batman 2? So that's what I was on about, the latter of your question, before we rewind and, you know, step back a little bit into the other parts. Just to get to that last part, I would love to say who has the highest chance, but again, like, I'm not gonna pretend to be a know-it-all. I would be lying. How would I know if Mr. Freeze has more of a chance than that of frickin' Scarface and Ventriloquist? I often say on the channel, Matt Reeves has such a tremendous task, one that I both envy but also don't at the same time, because if I was him, I would love helming the series. I would love bringing this to life. I would love that people loved my movie. I would love that everyone working on it made an absolutely incredible Gotham. The cast is stellar. It's like I'm at the peak of where I've wanted to be with this production since I got approved to make this Batman movie. But oh shit, I need to make the Batman 2. What villain do I use? Yes, there has been some things set up in the background. We've got literal Joker, albeit he hasn't crowned himself with the title of that of Joker because he's just referred to as a killer right now. We've got put away in Arkham and Batman Year One. Who else? You know, yeah, sure, we've got Penguin. You know, he's not even liking to be called the Penguin. He thinks of it as a bit derogatory, even though I think it's fairly predictable. He's going to like that and embrace that, and that could even be one of the final pack of punches of Call Me Penguin in the finale of the Penguin show. Bit cliche, but I can see that's where they might be going once he's actually obtained that, or filled that vacuum of power that Falcone left behind. But, you know, is he going to be the main villain? I mean, you could argue that the Penguin series facilitates him to be that of the big rogues gallery member to tackle in the second movie. But I don't think so. I think Penguin's always going to be that sleazeball in the movies, albeit elevating himself continuously up, that maybe even Batman underestimated him. Because as he says in one of those deleted scenes, you know, you may not see it now, but I'm going to own this city, or whatever he said to Selina Kyle. And that's when Falcone was still alive. You know, that's a pretty epic deleted scene. And also, you have to bear in mind, Batman was literally watching him say that the whole time. And then for him to maybe actually do that by the third movie, that'd be insane. Or even if not, some point in the future in our headcanon, where albeit we may not get movies anymore, we know this Batman, unless he dies, which let's just say he doesn't, will, you know, be up against this Penguin for decades to come. But I digress, getting back on point. That's Penguin. So you'd have to think, okay, I'm Matt Reeves, I have to make and choose which Rogues Gallery villain I want to do. And the thing is, that is such an incredible, exciting opportunity. I think he must be like restless at night, barely able to sleep sometimes at the excitement of that. Like, oh, I could do Poison Ivy and ground her in a believable way in where she's this kind of eco-terrorist in the sense of like, I want to do this in Gotham, but instead of metahuman powers, because maybe that's a bit fantastical, as in like going like this and then a root just bursts up through the street of Gotham, she might do it in more of a natural way that she has this experimental drug perhaps that she can accelerate plant growth, or who knows. Like, I've got a whole separate video on things coming out like that, and that's so exciting. And he could keep trickling those ideas along for separate villains, like Mr. Freeze. Oh, I think that could work. Like, maybe ground it in a bit of reality where he's working at Goth Cop. He's wearing a safety suit with his job, and that's the suit he has to actually stay in to stay alive after the accident he's been exposed to, because also at the same time he's trying to save his wife. Or what about Clayface? Maybe not so much a fantastical Clayface as we've been over in the recent Penguin series leaks, but maybe more of the Golden Age Clayface, where he actually was more of a killer and actually wore a mask of clay. But hey, to add some fantastical elements into that, what about some unrealistic prosthetics? Let's just say by far no one else can match his level of prosthetics that he puts on his face, to maybe a bit of Mission Impossible, not believable kind of facial things, but he doesn't actually mold his face. Like, again, you've got all of these possibilities. Who am I going to do? Who am I going to do? Like, that's such a pressure at the same time. So for me to say, oh yeah, Poison Ivy's more likely than Mr. Freeze, or Mr. Freeze is more likely than Scarecrow, it's so hard, I can't. But that's what he's wrestling with. So as much as people, for some reason, tend to lean on Mr. Freeze more, but I think that's only a result of the word of mouth. I think it's just because Mr. Freeze hasn't been done in a while since, you know, the cheesy days. Not only that, I think there is a really grounded way that Matt Reeves could do him. Again, more videos coming out in the future as to how I think this can be done, but it can explore Batman getting a bit more empathy for his villains, because yes, Mr. Freeze is going to be the antagonist, but there's also going to be a multifaceted aspect to him. That could be a really good arc for not only Batman investigating and trying to stop him, but having some empathy for his villains, rather than just like, you think they deserved it, huh? You think they deserved it, even though, again, that's a bit separate. What if he doesn't apply that to all of his rogues gallery, but now he actually kind of looks at them and is like, well, damn. And Victor Freeze is a very good example of that. So I know I've been rambling about this one for ages, but I get asked about who is the next villain a lot. Who do I think is most likely? I don't think, with all due respect to your question, most likely is applicable here, because Matt Reeves could pull out anyone, even one of the lesser known Rogues Gallery villains, and sure, the reception might be like, oh, I really thought it was going to be this character or Mr. Freeze, but there was no basis for that. There hasn't been any basis for it. Yes, he's commented on Mr. Freeze only because the word of mouth was so strong at the time. An interviewer asked him about it, and he was just like, well, the thing about that is, you know, while I think we're very comics faithful in our movies, we don't lean into the fantastical as much, but that's not to say that, you know, like, I'd like to find a way to ground that fantastical in a believable way. He likes the challenge of that. And so, like, that doesn't mean Mr. Freeze is happening. So, again, I tend to, it may be a boring answer, but like, expect anyone. Now, don't be surprised if it is like the Batman 2, Ice something, and it is Mr. Freeze. Yet again, as I answered on the previous question, there will be other, you know, chess pieces on the board, the Knight, the King, the Queen, other bits and pieces, like with what I was saying in the first movie, Carmine Falcone, the Penguin, but Riddler in the middle kind of thing. So I still fully expect that. But again, so don't be surprised if it is one of the ones where people are like, even there might be reception of the announcement saying like, oh, why couldn't he do a lesser known villain? Of course he had to do Mr. Freeze. Don't be surprised if it's somebody a lot lesser known, or just not, well, all the Rogues Gallery members are very well known, but just so obvious, because again, I think some people just always think Bane, oh, Scarecrow, oh, Mr. Freeze, no, oh, you know, Joker. But bottom line is, well, just given, you know, Batman's Rogues Gallery, you know, we got Joker, we got Clayface, we got Mad Hatter, we got Bane, we got Killer Croc, we've got freaking Poison Ivy, we've got Mr. Freeze, we've got freaking, did I already say Penguin? I don't know, we've got Ra's al Ghul, like, he keeps going. This is why I always repeat, I think, even though the first movie had the multiple characters, I think he's got to replicate that. And I also wouldn't be surprised if there's even more characters in it, but Matt Reeves will conduct that, be the puppet master of not, and sometimes in a TV show people are like, oh, too many characters, little development and stuff like that. He will curate it very, very well. Marinate the characters throughout the film nicely, despite Colin Farrell's screen time in the first movie. Look how well placed he was. Again, when we were going into the movie, after learning Colin Farrell said on Ellen or something like that, I think I only have like 9 to 11 minutes in the movie, which is kind of true, but I thought that was going to be like more or less in a couple of scenes. But it was like, sprinkled. Like, this is the timeline of the movie. It was sprinkled nicely throughout the movie. So was Alfred. Alfred was barely in it, yet you felt like you kept seeing his face every now and again, but Colin Farrell more. So what if he does that with, yeah, sure, let's say Mr. Freeze is the main villain or something like that, but Penguin, being more of a kingpin now, has a lot more screen time. What if you have some other factors coming in? Dare I say it, Barry Keoghan's Joker coming out of the repercussions of the Arkham series. Like, I feel like for Matt Reeves, he might honestly try and orchestrate his chessboard with multiple pieces rather than just Batman being the king and then the king on the other side, or Queen being the villain. But as for how you're curious as to how I think he would fit in with other characters, I don't know exactly what you mean there, like, will Mr. Freeze, if adapted, bump into other characters, or like, how would he interact with them? That's a good point, I suppose, because at least, with Penguin in the first movie, he fit in technically with other characters like Falcone, and Falcone was still linked to that of the main antagonist, Riddler, through him being, the forensic accountant, figuring out that, he was a part of, orchestrating and distributing the, money laundering and things like that through the Gotham Renewal Fund. So, I think there's going to be, even though that's not a direct connection between that of, like, the Penguin wasn't directly linked to the Riddler, even though there was the El Ratalada thing, you could argue that Penguin could offer some supplies if Victor Freeze is in hiding or something like that, because he's still desperately trying to save his wife. This is so off the cuff, by the way, so I'm not saying this is believable at all. I do think that there would be empathy for Batman, possibly on behalf of Jim Gordon, as he learns that he's trying to save his wife. Maybe there's a character out there who, I don't know if there was any, if at all, details on Jim and his family situation in this movie, but maybe he lost Barbara, maybe he has a daughter. I don't think that was ever properly leaned upon, but I don't know the extent of Jim's family situation, but that would be cool to lean into that in a bit more depth. What is Jim's home life like, and could he add more empathetic pondering for Batman, because he, as a possible family man himself, could at least help Batman get into the frame of mind that this, Mr. Freeze killer or person who's stealing this and that but killed people as a result because by any means necessary wanting to save his wife is doing it for a specific reason. I don't know, like, that you could go into weird angles like that, but this is why, going back to what I was saying even earlier before that, maybe not every character needs to be directly or even as indirectly linked, like Penguin was to Riddler in the first movie, as what they did in the first movie. This is why we're going back to what I was saying earlier. What if you have a fairly self-contained, larger Mr. Freeze who doesn't have to have Penguin being like the El Ratalada URL thing, and how that could link to Mr. Freeze in the second movie with a similar scenario? What if you have other bits of those puppet strings I was mentioning, other villains, other things, like Penguin's doing his own actual proper arc in the movie, that whilst Batman's trying to do this thing with Mr. Freeze, he's such a pain in the ass as well. So Lucas Gibson says, hey Boba, love the channel, man, and it was so much fun riding the hype train of the Batman with your videos and can't wait to do it again. Thank you. We're gonna definitely be on many train stops on the way to the Batman too. So my question is, do you think we will see as much Batman in the second film as we did in the first? I mean, as opposed to Bruce Wayne. I would say yes. Like, to be honest, you could crunch into some of the Batman time that we got in the first movie as a result of Bruce Wayne coming out a little bit more with Alfred's support, maybe going out in public, also working with Mayor Bella Real, becoming a bit more into that philanthropist mode, things like that. But I don't think, even if it did crunch into the Batman time, in terms of what we got in that of the first movie, that it would be noticeable. Like, I 100% believe one of Matt Reeves' goals with this trilogy is to have Batman, and when we tell a story in one of these movies with Batman saving a day, going up against a Rogues Gallery member in the second and third movie, the movie will predominantly show a lot of Batman. It's never really been done before properly like that. Just look at the Dark Knight movies or any other Batman movie before that. We haven't had Batman in it as much, is my main point here, as what was in the this first movie. Practically 98% of the time, it was Robert Pattinson in the bat suit, which is incredible. Lots of dialogue, which is unprecedented for Batman media, unless you're counting animations or something. So I don't think he will want to get rid of that aspect. However, I do think we will see quite a bit more Bruce Wayne. And again, I don't think that will distract from how much, Batman we loved seeing in the first movie. I think what would be noticeable, though, is just through including a bit more Bruce Wayne, because he's coming out of his shell, he's a bit more up for doing things. As I said, he could be arm in arm with Alfred, helping him do that. That will be noticeable, because in that of the first movie, it was extremely noticeable how there was almost no duality between that of Bruce Wayne and Batman, but that was obviously the point, because even though there was, to those, you don't have to be eagle-eyed, it's just you see where Bruce is at the point of the first movie. There is a duality there, but for the larger face value aspect of it, where people are like, oh, there's barely a difference between that of Batman and Bruce Wayne, he's so one-dimensional, that's the freaking point, because Bruce Wayne at this point only lives and breathes to have an effect, and that only belief for there on out is to be effective as Batman. But there is still that Bruce Wayne there, as what we saw in the hospital scene, little bits and murmurs here and there, and conversations with Alfred, his reactions at various parts of the movie. I expect that to slowly come out the shell, but it's like a sunrise. A sunrise doesn't happen like that. Oh yeah, sun's in, the freaking middle of the sky. It happens slowly, it slowly appears above the buildings, and it's getting there. It's getting there. The reason why I'm giving that analogy is because it's the second movie and he's had that growth and development in the first movie, I don't think it's going to be like, oh, Bruce is here now. Hey, yeah, Playboy, this, that, and the other. No. I still think he's going to be trickling over the buildings. And maybe you have like a half sun-shaped three-quarter by a certain part of the movie. But again, temper expectations, because lots of people will automatically assume now that, oh, we're going to get Playboy Bruce Wayne. Just because that's been done and has been done in the source material quite a bit, doesn't mean this Bruce Wayne will be that. He might be a lot more public, trying to have more of an effect as Bruce Wayne as well as Batman, just kind of going a bit more into his parents' mode, and that's what I mean. He might be trying to be more like, as what I often say, more of the telltale Batman with how he was public, but he was more, Wayne-y. He wasn't, in terms of a more philanthropic mode, he was hosting things, doing things, attending things. There wasn't such a need to distract from the identity of Bruce Wayne linking to that of Batman through the means of swimming in a hotel pool lobby, because just like what they've already somewhat established in this first movie, Jim and other cops just look directly at him, and they don't even think of that. I don't think Reeves is so interested in separating the mask from the man, so to speak, in the eyes of that of the public. I think with this one, it's just a given that, Bruce Wayne isn't Batman. So when we see Batman, as a result, Reeves probably is thinking, at least what I'm guessing, we don't need to do such a conscious effort for him to be a playboy. Because why? We can lean into the other aspects of growing Bruce publicly. He doesn't need to throw off his, immature side for the sake of faking it. I get why Nolan did that, and I get why stories do that, but I don't think that would be Reeves' angle. But I've tangented so much here. Yes, I think we will see as much Batman in the second film as we did the first. Even if, bottom line, there's a little bit cut to facilitate other scenes, because again, I don't think anyone will want more Bruce Wayne, even though they do, if that takes away from screen time of other villains like Colin Farrell's Penguin and stuff like that. No. I think it's going to be less Batman, but just, it won't be noticeable. It won't be noticeable because still, there was so much Batman in the first movie. There will still be so much Batman in the second movie, to the point of where even if you trim a few minutes off, there would have been so much Batman. It's just now we get a few more minutes doing other bits and pieces with that of Brucey Boy. So Jimmy X Wolvie asks, hey Boba, for a future sequel of the Batman, I would like to see Jon Bernthal portray the character of Harvey Dent Two Face after seeing his aggressive side as Punisher, and then a calm businessman in Ford vs. Ferrari. I believe he's the right guy for the role, if that's a villain Matt Reeves ever decides to introduce someday. Thoughts? I think I've read this question before, and I was like, okay, interesting, but the more you think about it, not that I disagreed with it, like, Jon Bernthal would be a very good choice. I don't think it's the first choice people think about, but definitely, he's an incredible actor. He can definitely play a charming, well-built kind of district attorney, smart man, all suited and booted up. I 100% believe that. Again, I have to think that Harvey is going to be in this series. And some people, and I agree with this argument, just because DA Gil Colson is no longer the DA doesn't mean that Harvey Dent is going to be the next one. It could mean that Harvey Dent is the next DA after this next DA that's replacing Gil. I agree. Like, he could be the assistant to district attorney or something like that. But either way, I think it would be a missed opportunity after Gil Colson is gone to not do Harvey in some shape or form, even if he's not the next DA. He could still be, projected to be the youngest attorney to become district attorney in Gotham City after whatever happens with the next DA. But again, I do feel like Matt Reeves might just lean towards the next DA after Gil Colson being Harvey, because for something to happen to the next DA and then Harvey to become the next DA would just be a bit like, oh, so we've been in before, Gil Colson, now this dude. But again, I do want to offer as well, just to go full circle, they could still do a new DA after Gil Colson. Harvey Dent still isn't the district attorney, but never becomes district attorney. That could be, again, like what I keep saying sometimes, after the movies are done and dusted, assuming Batman doesn't die, in the future, we know that at least we see Harvey Dent as an assistant district attorney, as an attorney, and even though we never saw the Two-Face transformation or him become district attorney, that will happen one day. At the end of the day with that, before people were like, oh, no, but like, we can't do everything, that's one thing we're gonna have to come to terms with. We can't do everything, and again, assuming Pattinson Batman doesn't die, he's still got many villains and other things to tackle throughout decades and decades to go, ideally, right? So I do feel like John Bernthal would be incredible, and to expand upon it slightly, the tangent I was just going on, I do think it makes sense to bring him in as youngest district attorney, Harvey Dent. Again, even if we don't get to Two-Face, I get it, but I do feel like it would only be beneficial, and it would be missing out on not doing Harvey in so many ways. One of the ways as well, again, I know you're not asking this, but I can't help but get these fluid thoughts out as I say it. This expands on the question earlier in terms of Bruce Wayne. With Bruce Wayne maybe becoming a bit more philanthropic in Gotham, so to speak, I feel like we could really lean into the friendship of Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne, because there seems to be a slight pattern that I'm picking up on here. Gotham will always be a shithole. I think we all agree with that. But hey, we got Mayor Bella Real now. Great, she's actually genuinely not a bad person. Harvey, at least at the beginning, well, also a new DA who isn't corrupt. He's a good person before Two-Face. But you see what I mean? Bruce is coming out of his shell. So, like, it feels like those, leading pinpoint figures of Gotham, the prince of the city, the new mayor who isn't corrupt, the new DA who isn't corrupt right now before the chemical burns or whatever you want to acid. It seems like a good Bruce Wayne arc to go on in terms of friendship. So I do feel like that needs to be done. Bring in Harvey, and as John, he would be great, because as Two-Face, if they ever wanted to get there, even if they didn't, you could see, just like with what I liked how Fox's Gotham did this with Nicholas D'Agosto. In Gotham, he was, obviously this was a prequel show, a lot of you are familiar here, a lot of you are still probably Gothamites who were subscribed back then watching this, but he never became Two-Face. But when he was trying certain trials or things like that, you saw that he had a bit of a temper sometimes. He truly was a good man. This is why a lot of us love Harvey Dent, because there's quite a complex layer to the man before he gets driven kind of man and has that Two-Face side to him. He was fighting for good, obsessed with getting the justice, doing it right, pure conviction in that. But sometimes that frustration, that temper would come out. And I feel like if they emulated that on the scenes of where we might see John Bernthal's Harvey in the second movie, maybe some cases going on, maybe they're trying to get Penguin for something or trying to do anything, right? And Bruce is just there because he has a meeting with the mayor, and maybe the DA is in the same room, the new DA after Gil, John Bernthal's Harvey Dent. Like, if he witnesses him, like, out of frustration and impatience maybe, just have that flash of Two-Face, even though he hasn't had the courtroom incident or whatever way they choose to do it in this iteration, if they even get there. Again, if they get there, you can still have Harvey Dent and never get to Two-Face. I do want to stress that. That would be amazing. And John Bernthal, with his ferocity and tenacity as Punisher, his wide acting range, can play a very charming man, an aggressive DA in the best lawyer aggressive is what I mean. Kind-hearted, fighting for justice with conviction man, getting along with the mayor, getting along with Bruce Wayne, getting along with him in a friendship way, and then seeing those snaps or like foreshadowings to Two-Face would not only be gold, but then it would be gold plated if we ever even got to Two-Face. So I do agree with you. He is the right guy for the role. I'm not saying he's the definitive guy, but just in terms of your question, it may not be what, like, you right now are thinking of, like, John Bernthal, the Punisher, really? No, but think about it. Like, Harvey, he would be great as Harvey Dent. Like, really good. Like, he might be in my top X. Again, my fan castings are all over the place because I'm a really indecisive person, but John Bernthal will always be on my mind now, like, for sure. So Joe Smith mentioned something that's been like an ongoing discourse in these discussion series videos ever since we heard that the whole gang is coming back, so to speak. But Joe Smith says, I see that Zoe Kravitz was announced to be in the sequel. As much as I loved her in it, I was hoping that she would be left out of the sequel and make an appearance in hopefully a third film if they make it. Just so new characters get enough screen time and that they give her a good enough reason for being back in Gotham. As she has been announced, do you think that these Batman films will focus on them two throughout the series rather than just him alone? It is interesting because, again, I think Zoe Kravitz is a very good Selina Kyle. Very good. But I was wondering before we had it announced that the sequel's coming, even though we knew that was happening, but it said that the whole cast is basically coming back. I was thinking, I do expect to see Selina in the second movie in some capacity, but I don't know how much, and should she even be in it that much? Again, I'm not saying she shouldn't, again, provided the very important context of how she needs to fit in this second movie just as much as she fit in the first movie. And without getting too far ahead of myself, to stay on this topic here just for a second, the reason why she was so relevant to that first movie and how she got involved with Batman is because she wanted to save a friend, find a friend. That got her involved in all kinds of parts of the spider's web, and then eventually becoming connected to this vigilante Batman and caring for him makes sense. But then as of the end of this movie, I'm not saying that Matt Reeves can't come up with a great idea, it's just I can't think of one right now that would feel as important and as, more importantly, the word being relevant to be in this second movie. Now, she does have one string now, that is Batman. She's got off to Bloodhaven, she even offered him to come with him, let's just get away together kind of thing. So there is that, you know, dance between the bat and the cat, quite literally. Quite literally. So she will have those ties to Batman. So I just think, with her coming back, to answer your last question, will this be about them two throughout the series rather than just him alone? I would still lean on it's more about him, because this is about that psychological roadmap about the Batman. However, I would feel a bit questionable if it's like, you know, like Batman and Robin. Let's just say Batman and Robin was the first movie, Batman and Robin was the second movie, and Batman and Robin was the third movie. It would feel like that, but except with Selina being Robin, if she was in the second movie and third movie as much as the first movie. So, do you see what I'm saying there? Because she was heavily involved. There was that dance between them in the first movie that was very relevant, was very Batcat. They literally nailed that on the head with that reluctance of Bruce wanting, and, you know, Selina and then Selina being a bit like, oh, you know, which way am I pointing? Kind of, they nailed that. I know I'm rambling at this point, but in the second movie, that can always be revisited upon, but this is why I feel like it could be a minimized role. And this is why it won't feel more like the series is about them both rather than just him alone, because if it's like this, it will still feel like more like about Batman. If she's in the city, this time she's got a bit more hardened maybe. And what I mean by that is she's stealing things, this, that, and the other, and Batman comes across her and it's like, look, I can't keep letting you do whatever you're doing that is shady. Yeah, I really care about you, so Selina, please stop. And it will be more developed on that front. As Matt Reeves says, well, he's committed to the idea of being a vigilante, and she's committed to doing what she's doing. Can two people that are broken really ever be together? So that could cause the initial, okay, she's come back to Gotham, there's some kind of new thing she maybe has, she's more into her Catwoman mode, she's embracing more of what she's doing, as Matt Reeves says, but Batman is only further embracing his Batman vigilante side, so they're at odds with each other that way. But that just suggests a minimized role to me. You could maybe tie her to the plot, but I hope this wouldn't come across too contrived, in where Selina has stolen something that would be very crucial to what Mr. Freeze is searching for. Again, that's a bit contrived. Oh, Selina happens to be trying to steal the very thing and trying to put on the black market the very thing that Mr. Freeze wants in order to save his wife. That would bring her squarely into the plot. And Bruce could just be like, as Batman, Selina, for crying out loud, can't you just for once just not do this, drop it? but that's just way too simple for me. Like, that's way too simple. But they could maybe complicate and flesh out a storyline that ties her in just as much. To be fair, another thing off the top of my head is that Selina comes back to Gotham in the second movie. This could honestly be it. I'm not saying it will be, but she, again, through continuing this road of what she's doing, gets herself, when doing a job, stuck in some heavy, bad business. I feel like if Selina comes back and Bruce just, again, has such a fancy for this girl, they're linked in all the ways we saw in that first movie, the chemistry bleeding off of them. This could be a side plot, as what I was getting into in the very foundation of this video with some of the beginning questions. In the second movie, bad business, Bruce goes out to save her because she's wrapped up in a world of... The thing about Catwoman is, what you have to remember here is that even though Selina is Catwoman, she still hasn't got the moniker of Catwoman. And what I mean by that is, arguably, Selina Kyle in The Batman is the most innocent version of her we are going to see. So what I'm trying to get to and springboard this conversation to is, throughout time, because that was only Batman Year 2, 1 year, 6 months in, Catwoman isn't even called Catwoman, so what's your guess is going to happen? She's only going to get more shady, only going to get, unfortunately, more wound up in the corrupt and the immoral of Gotham. All while being a good spirit inside, and Bruce knowing that, she'll always kind of get down with those in that of, like, the 44 below. Not necessarily have choice, kind of to rob them, if anything, but she will be in and amongst that crowd. So this is why Selina isn't a hero. She's an anti-hero. And you know Catwoman from the many iterations of her, so I feel like the second movie, especially by the third, she could have been really transformed compared to that of the innocent. She's not innocent in the first movie, but by comparison to where she's going to be, she's innocent in the first movie. So again, second movie, she gets herself wrapped up even more through following the course that she is on, and that transforms her more into Catwoman. But unfortunately, the tragedy of this is, as much as these two characters care about each other, they can never be with each other, as Matt Reeves details, because the more she goes that way, the more she exposes herself to that way of life, albeit that she's maybe faking it for a job, or like surrounding herself with this, she's gonna get a bit more shadier, and she's gonna be like, I can't ever be maybe what you want me to be, but you know, I'm still not one of them. I'm still not technically a rogues gallery bastard like the Riddler or Joker, but I'm still kind of shady. Batman's like, oh please, I want to keep longing after you, I want to keep, please just come back, but like, I can't let you do this, so please stop. The further she gets, the more it turns him away from her, but the more he also wants to save her from getting further and further down that road and further into the moniker of Catwoman. It's just, that could be the momentum and the growth they're going to. And to be honest, to stop rambling about this now, the second movie could be, as what I was getting into it earlier, her continuing the course of getting the moniker of Catwoman, and through doing that is her getting wrapped up in shady business, but also pushing each other further and further away from each other, but always having that foundation of ironic loyalty to one another, because they like each other. But Selina's going to keep going further into anti-hero villainy, if you will, and Batman's going to be further pushed away, but further driven to want to get Selina out of it. And so that could be what they do. But I think I'm going to end this video here today, because that's been a long discussion series video, a lot more backlog questions to go, so do look forward to more videos, and let me know if you are enjoying them. I would really appreciate that. If you did get this far in the video, type in the comments section to prove that you're one of the real ones. That quote from Jim in the movie when he's shouting to the penguin like, open your eyes! So hashtag open your eyes. And also, it always reminds me of that moment where Penguin's like, come on, what are you showing me? Nah. I love that moment in the movie. By the way, yeah, hashtag open your eyes, like the video, share with your friends, do subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And hey, one thing you can do, even if you have notifications on, click on the notification bell again and set it from personalized to all to never miss out on a future update video. But yeah, that's it from me today, guys. More Batman videos to come on outside the discussion series bonus stuff. We're going to get into some bonus fact information coming out of this, parts that never came to be in the movie, but what could also be appearing in future movies from some ideas in this. But gotta love you and leave you. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat Family, in the next video. Goodbye.